Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Emma Gillespie. We are bringing you something a little bit different today. I want to introduce you to Australia's first female astronaut, Katherine Bennell-Pegg. Katherine made history in 2023 when she was selected to join a training program with the European Space Agency, eventually graduating as the first Australian woman to become a qualified astronaut. Her journey is pretty extraordinary, from studying engineering to working on space missions and training for the possibility of going to space herself someday. I spoke to Katherine all about what training to become an astronaut actually involves, what excites her, and what she hopes Australia's role in space will look like in the years to come. Welcome to the podcast, Katherine. Thank you for chatting to us today.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure.
Australia's first female astronaut, a pretty cool title, but one that I'm sure comes after many, many years of hard work. When was the moment you realised you wanted to become an astronaut, and how do you even begin to pursue a dream like that?
Yeah, well, for me, becoming an astronaut is definitely the culmination of a childhood dream. I grew up in Curly on the northern beaches of Sydney, where I remember thinking the sky was full of stars, and I used to like lying on the grass in my back garden, getting bindies all over my pajamas, looking up at the sky. And when my mum told me that some of those stars were entire planets that no one had ever visited before, I just thought that would be such an adventure. And I think it's that same feeling kids have when they want to look under a rock to see if there's a bug, or climb a tree because it's there, and then look out at the view. It's that feeling that's driven humans to want to explore our world and understand it better, and also to explore and understand space. But as I grew up, it evolved into not just curiosity and adventure, but wanting to make concrete steps forward in science and knowledge and discovery. I thought that would be really exciting. And I love sports and outdoor activities, and that just seemed like a wonderful combination. And then when I was at high school, my school said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, well, an astronaut. You know, what else is there?
Duh.
So I only gave them one choice. And instead of, belittling me or making fun of me, they just said, well, go figure out what that would really take, probably hoping I'd see some sense. But what I learned is that, yes, of course, it's unlikely. Australia didn't even have a space agency, right? Let alone an astronaut program. But I saw that you need a first career before you can even apply to be an astronaut. You can be a scientist, you can be an engineer, you can be a pilot, you can be a medical doctor, or combinations of those things. You should be doing expeditions to Antarctica, or in the military, or on scientific research vessels or charity work. You should have operational skills like flying or scuba diving or skydiving. You should have lived internationally and speak other languages, and you should be fit and healthy, and a few other things. And I thought, well, what's the downside? Let's give it a crack. Someone's got to do that job. And the pursuit of that job sounded fun, and you have a first career anyway. It's just the cherry on the top of that. So I decided to try and pursue being a pilot in the Air Force. But in the end, that process was taking some time. I was medically postponed, and later that was fortunately found out not to be a problem. But in the meantime, I chose to pursue space engineering with a double degree in physics. And I didn't even know what engineering was. I just went for it because it had the word space in the title. And I'm so glad I did, because becoming an engineer has led me to travel and be all over the world working on some of the most exciting missions I could have ever hoped for, and also then bringing me back home to Australia. So now I also value being an astronaut for what I know space does for society. We rely on it for new medicines and to look after our environment and understand it, and also for the impact it can have on a country in raising the level of aspiration for people, especially young people. So it's evolving, but it's stronger than ever why I want to be an astronaut, and becoming an astronaut is truly just the beginning.
I think it says a lot to your character that broad, enormous remit of kind of things that you need to tick off, that massive list of prerequisites, that you saw that as this exciting opportunity and you weren't scared away. Obviously, growing up, you wouldn't have had a role model in the form of a woman pioneering in this way, in this space here in Australia. Did that deter you at all? Was that something that you were aware of, or were you so determined to see this dream through that that was kind of irrelevant?
Well, I've never really been someone that ascribes to hero worship. No one's perfect and everyone's different, and we should all write our own stories. But certainly there were people that inspired me. My mother had studied physics, so I was able to foster that passion. And my father was really into hiking and abseiling. And when young, that was a fantastic basis. But I had books about women who were explorers like Nancy Bird Walton and, other Amelia Earhart. And I remember it was a book that said, "My God, it's a woman." It was about first female aviators. And I knew about Sally Ride and other women who had been astronauts. I was also at an all-girls high school, which for me meant that I never really considered whether I was good enough because I was a girl or not. I knew it was some things that not many girls did, but I didn't think it affected performance because it quite frankly doesn't, even if we're still in the minority. So I was fortunate that by the time I got into a male-dominated field at university, I was already relatively confident that with enough effort, you can achieve pretty much anything, but it takes effort.
Can you walk us through a little bit of what astronaut training looks like? You obviously had gone through all this rigorous training in terms of becoming a pilot, Air Force, engineering. You'd lived a whole life, right? And that would have been challenging in and of itself. But then we take it up a notch. How do you train to become an astronaut?
Yeah, so to become an astronaut, a traditional government astronaut like I am, where you're representing your country, you first have to go through a selection process that can take usually about a year and a half or so. I applied to be a British astronaut, actually, through the European Space Agency. Their first call in about 10 or so years, the first and only application I've ever had the chance to apply to. And that was an incredible adventure in itself. And at the end, I ended up representing Australia, which was a greater outcome than I could have hoped for, and one that was entirely unexpected for me. But once you get through the selection process, you then have to do what's called astronaut candidate training or basic training. And it's only at the end of that training, which is about a year and a half, that you can call yourself an astronaut. You get your wings that you wear in your flight suit, and that means you're eligible for professional government missions representing your country to the International Space Station or even beyond, say to the moon. If your country chooses to pursue that direction. So that was really exciting. I graduated last April, so April 2024, and the training was spectacular. The first astronauts we know that they were typically test pilots or fighter pilots from the US or the USSR way back then, quite alpha in personality. And that's because of the kind of work they had to do. They were, quite hands-on flying, new vehicles, very dangerous and short missions, quite individual in terms of how you perform. Today, the main destination for astronauts is the International Space Station. The International Space Station is huge. It's the size of a soccer field almost, 109 meters across. And the inside part, there's about as much volume or air as, say, a 5-bedroom house or the passenger part of an A380. And it's filled with science experiments. And most people up there are there for 6 months, and you're working with, 7 to 14 other astronauts up there in some cases. So you have to be a team player. And you're up there to do science that you can't do on Earth with gravity and atmosphere in the way, into medicine and materials and every other kind of science and technology you can imagine. And because you're up there for such a long time, you have to be an all-rounder. So we learn every role. In the shuttle era, previously, people were very specialized. In this era, people have to be all-rounders. We have to be good enough at a lot of things. So in space, we're scientists in the sky. We're the hands and eyes of our country's scientists on the ground. So we learn many kinds of science, especially in the labs, the hands-on work. We are medical test subjects ourselves because of how the body does weird and wonderful things in space, and we have to look after our crewmates. So we're also medical doctors or paramedics or nurses, depending on what's happening, or researchers. We need to be engineers and tradies, space tradies, fixing the toilets and the plumbing and the aircon. There's no gyms, come to the ISS and fix it for me. It's on you. We also are, in a way, diplomats for our country on the world stage. We have the opportunity to showcase the best of what our country can offer. So we need to understand that and be across that. We are also educators. We speak to young people and do experiments for classrooms and to support the curriculum up there, and be science communicators. So we also learnt about communication and photography. We learned how to do spacewalks in deep pools underwater, over full-scale mock-ups of the space station. And because water's heavy, and slows down your movements. We also went in what's called vomit comets, or zero-G planes that fly like a roller coaster, where you kind of skydive inside them and they're around you, so you feel that you're weightless. And that was incredible. With a push of a finger, you fly around the cabin, and you need to hold on when you use a drill, or you spin, so you practice all those kinds of skills. We learned how to operate the huge robotic arm on the space station, and we did that in simulators. We need winter survival, ocean survival, firefighting and rescue, lots of fitness, and the list goes on. And we had over 300
Wow.
instructors in 13 months. It was remarkable. We even learnt Russian.
All of that in
So
13 months.
yeah, but it was wonderful. I did it in a class of 5 others, wear the patch on my right shoulder. And we were all in it together, not in competition, there to help each other through it, all with different backgrounds. And it was such a pleasure to learn in that way from the best in their fields. And the hardest part was honestly just pacing ourselves through it so we don't get burnt out by our own enthusiasm to learn everything.
Or burnt out by the vomit comet.
Luckily, no vomit from any ASCANs. That's what you call astronauts before they graduate, ASCANs in our
Yeah.
plane. But yeah, some were suffering up the back.
Sounds extraordinary. Some would call it terrifying, and that would be me. Have you ever been to the International Space Station?
No, I haven't been to space yet. So maybe that's something in my future. Nothing's guaranteed. It's still early days for Australia. We've never had an Australian supported mission with Australian payloads and Australian science. So right now I'm focused on outreach on the ground, on unlocking opportunities for researchers and scientists to be able to put their payloads up or provide services into this world, because it's growing. The International Space Station's coming towards the end of its life by the end of the decade. So all these new space stations are in planning. There's space stations around the moon, and Australia has so many great capabilities that we can bring to the table if we know the opportunities exist. So I'm focused on helping with that too.
How do you stay sharp in, your day-to-day role is so busy with all of this outreach and science communication and science on the ground, but how do you kind of stay physically and mentally ready for a future where maybe you are spending 6 months on the space station or a space station?
Hi, I'm Zara. I'm the co-founder of the Daily Aus, and we started this company because we think news can be done differently. If you agree, you can hit subscribe. It's the best way to help us grow. Now, back to the video.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one. So the life of an astronaut is defined by uncertainty, really. Being from an emerging space nation is just another onion layer of uncertainty on the top of that. And we're recruited for our ability to handle uncertainty and perform in it. And then we're further trained in that. And ultimately, you just have to love what you do and believe in the higher purpose and be able to find your motivation that you're ready to contribute in all these different ways. So for me, in terms of time management, I try and overlap things where I can. And I'm at the same time as being really strict with my boundaries. I make sure I have enough time, whatever that means. It's different for each individual, but enough time for my kids and me to see each other in the evenings and spend good time. When I exercise, I try and do it with them or as part of a commute. If I'm taking the kids to a sports game, I might be running laps around their field. You try and fit things in, or on the side of a swimming lesson, one eye on the foreign language book and another on the lesson. So you can find your own way. But what's really important is through that, especially as people that, anyone that loves what they do or has a high pressure job, you have to also manage your self-care. What I found really interesting as part of our human behavior and performance training was, for astronauts, self-care isn't just a means to perform, it is actually a performance measure. If you are burning out, you are seen as not performing, even if you're delivering. And you have to identify in yourself what those markers are. So for me, it's a certain amount of hours sleep a night. If I don't exercise for, a certain amount of days in a row the way I normally would, they're like little yellow flags that you're not working sustainably. Sometimes you can't, right? You have to push, but then you need to make sure that you give yourself that time to recover. And I know I've definitely been guilty of not doing that in the past. And it was really refreshing on astronaut training to see senior astronauts unashamedly saying no when they knew that it would push them too hard, because there will always be more you can learn. There will always be more you can contribute. And you're the only one that can put your hand up and say, all right, this is as much as I can do if you want me to keep performing longer term. So that was really a good takeaway for me.
We are in this remarkable era where space is becoming so much more accessible, seemingly through, the kind of commercial space flights that we're seeing, the collaboration between space agencies and private companies. And, just a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, we were talking about NASA's Artemis program, which is aiming to return humans to the moon with a mission by mid-2027 to get there and eventually reach Mars. What excites you the most about this new era that we're in? Space is really, at the forefront of the kind of international conversations that we're having right now.
Yeah, it's an absolutely phenomenal time to be an astronaut, especially an Australian astronaut at this time. You're right. The world is really on the cusp of, the next great space exploration or industrialization endeavor. And this uncertainty creates opportunity for new entrants, new ways of thinking and doing things. The Australian Space Agency was only established in 2018, so we don't have to turn the ship. We're already emerging in this more commercialized space era. And that's a good thing. It should be as commercial as possible, as government is necessary. Government uses taxpayer funds, and they should be used where only they can be used. And that's the way that we see this. So there's an important role to play there, but commercial actors are also incredibly capable. We can look towards our industry. We have examples of startups that are more sustainably finding critical minerals for things like electric cars in a more environmentally friendly way. The space agency has given them grant funding, and they've scaled off the back of that and are now sending sensors to the moon. We have other industries able to spin into space because they see opportunity to remain at the cutting edge and learn there and spin it back, like our mining sector and our remote medicine sector, horticulture and agriculture sector. And it's very, very exciting. I know that a lot of my colleagues could end up on the moon. I'm even qualified for the moon. The world's the oyster, and the kind of learnings that we will gain from this, we can't even imagine. When you have a space mission, you have an intentional goal. You have an objective, right? One of the things we know that we'll learn in the Artemis missions, going back to the South Pole of the moon, is about the geology of the moon. What's in the subsurface? Australian sensors are going to help with that. What is under there? And that's not interesting just because it's knowledge we don't have. It's interesting because that will also teach us about the early Earth and what's deep under the Earth's crust. And that is an input that we need to refine in our climate change models. We need to understand the geothermal inputs better in our climate change models. So there's those quite practical things. But there's also the unintentional spin outs, the new technologies that will spin out we can't even imagine, like how MRIs and laser technology was furthered through space. Solar energy was not invented by the space sector, but the space sector helped bootstrap it through to a point where it was commercially competitive and relevant decades later in the modern world. Same with cordless drill technology, right? So cordless drills were invented before they were used in space, but they didn't have a market really. So Apollo needed cordless drills for astronauts to use on the moon. And then they were furthered and they could then go to markets. Every time you use a cordless drill in your home, you're using space technology. So there's a lot of work to be done on a global scale to fully understand what space is doing. But Australia's right there. So it's an exciting time for us to be able to move forward.
If you could choose any mission, moon, Mars, space station, something else beyond our wildest dreams, where would you most want to go, or what mission would you most want to be a part of and why?
That's incredible. Look, to go to space, to do, to make discoveries representing Australia in any capacity would be a phenomenal honour for me. But most astronauts of my era dream of the moon, right? Like to be able to step out onto the surface of the moon and make those discoveries and look back at Earth as part of a team of astronauts from a team of nations, fostering good relations around the world at the same time. You're a visible tip of an iceberg of a larger team. That would be phenomenal. Can you imagine stepping out of that hatch and looking up? I think, Mars is the purview probably of the next generation if humanity chooses to pursue that. And there's a lot we need to solve to do that in terms of new medicines, in materials, in closed loop sustainable systems. And if we get there, the world's come a long way. So that will be amazing. If I'm going to go sci-fi, it's got to be like an exoplanet or like a planet like a moon like Europa, where, you know, there might be life there. We don't know. We're going to go explore that. That would be pretty epic as well. I think you'd want a good radiation suit if you're anywhere near, you know, our gas giants, but to look up at them on the horizon while exploring. Yeah, sci-fi stuff, but you can think like that, right? Sometimes.
Shout out to Europa. What advice, Katherine, before we let you go, what advice would you give to young Australians, particularly young women who dream of a career in space, but maybe they don't know what opportunities even exist or where to start?
I would say go for it. Working in space, you get to be at the cutting edge of the cutting edge, at the forefront of discovery, of identifying and solving problems the world needs solved. And you do it with people that have such goodwill across the space sector. Sometimes you compete, but it's like you compete within a single sports code. You still have a love for the sport, so you can appreciate the success of others. As a young woman or a woman, for those people out there, you might be in the minority, but you'll find your place. And when you're in the minority, you just add additional value. It's something that you should pursue without hesitation. If you want to work in space and you're not particularly STEM-minded, space is a whole industry. Yes, we need scientists to ask the big questions and engineers to figure out how to answer them. But we also need space lawyers. We need space marketers. We need space media talents. We need people that stitch together the spacesuits and drive the trucks and drive the ships with the rockets on the back. We need the people in mission control teaching the astronauts to use the fitness equipment. We need nutritionists. It's a whole industry. If you put the word space in front of a job, it exists somewhere in the world, or it could if you choose to create that opportunity and pursue it. Within Australia, when I grew up, I felt I had to leave Australia to have a space career. I followed in the footsteps of people like Andy Thomas and Paul Scully-Power, Australians that went to space for NASA, because that's the only path I could see to work in big, beautiful missions that I hope to. But now kids today, they have so many opportunities here. They don't have to leave. They have, you know, a new Australian rocket being developed in Queensland that's already had its first launch and is planning more. We have pharmaceuticals coming down in re-entry capsules to outback Australia, South Australia, and also samples from asteroids and Mars landing there. We've got small satellites being developed in many of the states and territories around our country. We've got school kids putting payloads on the International Space Station, and we have startups forming all the time. So I would say, yeah, there's opportunity, and there's also opportunity to have impact and have joy when you do it here.
Katherine, you're an absolute rock star. Thank you so, so much for talking to us today. It's been really fascinating to learn a bit more about your world and beyond.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.